Good evening, you're with Sky News. Diana's body is finally at rest tonight in the grounds of the Spencer family home, Althorp, after a day in which the world mourned the death of the People's Princess. The funeral procession began at her London home, Kensington Palace. Her sons, William and Harry, joined the cortege as it made its way to Westminster Abbey.
During an informal service, Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, described her as the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty. He delivered a bitter attack on the media, accusing photographers of hounding her to her death, and he pledged a different upbringing for her sons. Tonight they're understood to be with their father at Highgrove, the Queen's at Balmoral. We start with this morning's procession.
There was a moment when the crowd first caught sight of the funeral procession, the princess's coffin topped by flowers from her children, that the people's grief became unbearable. The long journey home on this early September morning had begun out of sight of the cameras as the casket at sunrise was gently placed on the gun carriage. At exactly 9:08, the funeral cortege moved slowly out of her former home at Kensington Palace at the start of the 4-mile route to Westminster Abbey. The coffin, draped in the royal standard and covered with wreaths from her family, lay on an oak board suspended above a 13-pounder gun which had seen service in the First World War. Drawn by members of the King's Troop Royal Artillery, flanked by 8 guardsmen of the Welsh Guards, the foot guards to the sovereign maintained a slow and stately pace down South Carriage Drive. The muffled tenor bell at the Abbey marking the progress of the procession minute by minute. London had become a place of pilgrimage today. Those in the crowds that lined the route, at times 20 deep, were united in collective grief, paying their last respects and playing their part in a moment of history. Mostly they remembered her in absolute silence, a silence that enveloped the procession as it moved slowly through Hyde Park towards the Abbey. Most seemed numbed even after a week of mourning, unable to comprehend their loss. Outside the gates of the palace, the extended royal family, gathered together for the first time since the tragedy, waited to pay their respects before leaving for the Abbey. And waiting for their mother up the Mall at St. James's Palace, the 2 young princes, William and Harry, who had somehow, somewhere, found the strength and the courage to join the mother they adored to walk alongside her for the last time. And behind them, not the massed bands and serried ranks of soldiers, so much a part of other royal funerals. Here were the princess's friends, the representatives from more than 100 of her charities, streaming out behind the coffin, keeping company with their patron on this, the long last mile to the Abbey. It had taken almost exactly 2 hours to cover the 4 miles to Westminster Abbey. With infinite care and attention, the 8 Welsh guardsmen lifted the half-ton lead and oak coffin to their shoulders. Finally entering the west gate of Westminster Abbey, the House of Kings, to lay Diana, Princess of Wales, beneath the altar of the King of Kings.
Through the great west door of Westminster Abbey, the Welsh guardsmen carried Diana's coffin towards the nave. The nation held its breath for the young soldiers as they transferred the coffin onto the catafalque, the most onerous duty these young men are ever likely to perform. The ceremony was to embrace many traditional aspects of an Anglican funeral, but also some modern touches, reflecting the Queen's words that this would be a unique service for a unique person. The occasion would also be marked by a shattering address from Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. Outside the Abbey, as at many points throughout the country, giant television screens broadcast the service to hundreds of thousands of people, some of whom joined in the singing of Diana's favourite hymn. In a sad echo of a happier day, the Prime Minister read from the same passage of Corinthians which had formed part of Charles and Diana's wedding in 1981.
When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now, we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love.
And then the moment which reflected the extent to which the people had dictated the tone and character of the service.
Goodbye, Rose. May you well grow in our hearts. You are the greatest places where lives are torn apart. Called out to our country, and you whispered to those in pain. Now you belong to heaven, and the stars spell out your name. And it seems to me you live your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's green fields. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
Since Diana's death, Elton John's Candle in the Wind has been the most requested record on Britain's radio stations. Originally a tribute to Marilyn Monroe, the song's been rededicated to Diana, who, like the American movie star, died amid events seemingly beyond her control.
Golden child, even though we try, the truth brings us to tears. All our words cannot express the joy you brought us through the years. And it seems to me you live your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when and the rain setting. Your footsteps will always follow you along England's greenest fields. Candles burned out wonderful. Your legend ever will.
The tribute from Earl Spencer was nothing less than astounding, an address which pulled no punches about his sister's life and death, and left the royal family in little doubt that Princes William and Harry, like their mother, should stay close to the people.
On behalf of your mother and sisters, I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you are steering these two exceptional young men, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned. We fully respect the heritage into which they have both been born, and will always respect and encourage them in their royal roles. But we, like you, recognize the need for them to experience as many different aspects of life as possible, to arm them spiritually and emotionally for the years ahead. I know you would have expected nothing less from us. William and Harry, we all care desperately for you today. We're all chewed up with sadness at the loss of a woman who wasn't even our mother. How great your suffering is, we cannot even imagine. I would like to end by thanking God for the small mercies he's shown us at this dreadful time, for taking Diana at her most beautiful and radiant, and when she had joy in her private life. Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister, the unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.
Significantly, there was widespread applause inside and outside the Abbey for Earl Spencer's address. At the end of the service, the country and millions more around the world joined in 1 minute's silence. The half-muffled bells of the Abbey church ended the silence, and as the hearse departed, spontaneous applause broke out, in part a final farewell, and perhaps too a moment of relief that this most harrowing of mornings was drawing to an end, as was an extraordinary period in the life of this country. For 1 week in early September, a princess became a queen who found an eternal place in the hearts of her people, and the people saluted her as one who showed she could walk with kings nor lose the common touch.
And now, with a ripple of applause, the princess began the last stage of her journey home. Starting off back along the route she came down just a short time before, on a gun carriage, escorted by guardsmen. That had been the very public part of the mourning process. But now that process, the mood and the purpose, was to change from a semi-state occasion to one of private mourning. As she passed the troopers outside Horse Guards Parade and headed towards her home, Althorpe, where she would be buried on a small island in the middle of the family estate. And already across the route she was travelling, mourners were throwing the last of the millions of flowers brought in her memory. Past Buckingham Palace, where the Union flag was still flying at half-mast, an unprecedented change to tradition and protocol. And the Union flag would come down, and the royal standard would fly again from the masthead, once the Queen, as reigning sovereign, returned. The police out came thick and fast, sliding across the hearse, in front of it, some landing on the windscreen and getting caught in the windscreen wipers. More and more the flowers came, and a ripple of applause again, with the crowds very, very close to the hearse as it passed slowly through this narrow street. So many flowers on this hearse now, covering the bonnet, covering the roof. At the start of the motorway, the cortege stopped just for a minute or two, and someone got out to start clearing the bonnet of a huge pile of flowers that were on it, taking them off so at least the driver could see where he was going. First from one side and then from the other. And leaving them by the side of the road. All the bridges across the motorway were lined with people. And even pedestrians now on the motorway, climbing up the grassy banks, pushing their way forward, all wanting to get one last glimpse of this small funeral cortege. At Althorpe's local station, Long Buckley, the royal train had arrived carrying the Prince of Wales, his two sons, William and Harry, Earl Spencer and his two sisters, Lady Jane Fellows and Lady Sarah McCorquodale, as well as Diana's mother, Mrs. Shan Kidd. Here a fleet of Rolls-Royces were waiting for them. And this was the way they travelled the last few miles to the Althorpe estate, along this road lined with people. And through the gates, where again flowers are piled high on either side, and into the privacy of this family home. And here they would wait, the funeral cortege carrying Princess Diana's body to come. Slowly now, round the final bends of the narrow country road, came this small procession. And still the flowers came, looping through the air, some landing on the hearse, others falling onto the road.
Well, during his tribute to Diana, Earl Spencer spelt out his anger over the way he felt his sister had been hounded to her death. He also insisted that her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, should not be brought up, restricted by royal duty and protocol.
Applause at a royal funeral, unprecedented response to an astonishing eulogy. In a setting where uncontentious tributes were expected, the princess's brother took the opportunity of a 2.5 billion worldwide audience to criticize the role of both the media in her death and first the royal family for insisting she relinquish her full title after the divorce.
And who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic.
And he vowed the Spencer family would shelter his nephews from the pressure of royal formality his sister had found so stifling.
She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf. We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair. And beyond that, on behalf of your mother and sisters, I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you are steering these two exceptional young men.
The princess's friends from the world of show business said they hoped it meant her sons would also embrace the concerns of society's victims.
She backed AIDS, she backed leprosy, she backed homelessness, she backed drugs.
She backed victims of our society.
Absolutely. And those with no voice. Those who couldn't speak for themselves. Now, if she does that, and if that is continued to the understanding of Prince William and Prince Harry, then her life will not have been totally in vain.
The Earl, who'd banned tabloid editors from the guest list, told of the persecution and puzzlement his sister felt.
She talked endlessly of getting away from England, mainly because of the treatment that she received at the hands of the newspapers. I don't think she ever understood why her genuinely good intentions were sneered at by the media, why there appeared to be a permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down.
It brought the crowds outside to their feet in support, and two former editors accepted that the public clamour for change would have to be heeded.
We're all guilty. I know it sounds cliche and silly to say, but we all loved her to death.
They were brutal because they just wanted to know anything, everything. They wanted to eat her up. She was a star. She was the most glittering star in the firmament.
In surroundings of such tradition and continuity, the Spencers continued this week's pressure for change, urging a fundamental rethink in the royal family's attitudes, the media coverage, and the public's previously insatiable appetite for every detail. Jeff Mead, Sky News.
And Jeff Mead's at Westminster Abbey. As the evening draws in, Jeff, what sort of atmosphere has been left at the Abbey by this extraordinary day?
It has indeed been a day that none of us will forget, and as twilight falls here, still you can see in front of the Abbey the many hundreds of people still looking at those thousands of floral displays which have been such a hallmark of throughout this week, and a culmination today of the people's mourning. They have come in their tens of thousands, most carrying a small, simple posy of flowers, which they put at the places like here outside Westminster Abbey that have become a shrine to the princess. This evening, many still strolling along here, reading the cards, looking at the flowers there. The traffic, as we can see, also is building up too now. But it's as though after such a momentous day, people still don't want to let go. They don't want to simply go home. They want to stay here. It's as if, even at this late stage, with the princess now buried in Northamptonshire, the privacy of the Spencer family estate, these who regarded her so much as their own want to hang on to something of the day. They don't want quite to let it go completely.
It was a momentous ceremony. It was also, from our point of view, a very quiet one, wasn't it? Just that sound of people expressing their emotions and the sound of horses' hooves. Quite extraordinary.
That's right. That was one of the most startling things. I was out on the ceremonial route this morning, right at the start at Kensington Palace, and there was a hush the like of which I've never heard as the first slow clip-clops of the horses drawing that gun carriage came into hearing, and as the coffin itself came into sight, utter hush fell over the crowds, who were 15, 20 deep on each side of the road. And it was only as the coffin was pulled into full view that you then heard the first and a remarkable sound in this country of ours, known for its restraint, the sobbing, the crying, the spontaneous shouts of "Diana, we love you." I think this very much the essence of what has been I mean, she's been described as the people's princess. This was the day when her people said their farewell, and it was something which expressed a very intimate relationship which such a figure, a member of the royal family, was able to establish with people. It was because they knew her so well through the media that they felt she was one of theirs, and almost it was the way in which her troubles have been so catalogued, and that's something that we in the media have certainly been criticised for this week, and astonishingly so, in Earl Spencer's oration in the Abbey behind me. But it was that kind of detail, I think, which gave people a sense that they knew her very well. They knew her failings as well as her successes.
Jeff Mead, thank you very much.
Well, let's join our reporter Andrew Wilson at Buckingham Palace, who's with newspaper executive Andrew Neil and royal biographer Christopher Wilson.
Good evening, Steffi. Yes, indeed, listening to Jeff a moment ago, talking about people wanting to hang on. That's the case here as well, though I might add that the rest of London is like a ghost town. If you were to walk up to Oxford Street or beyond Hyde Park, there's absolutely no one there. No cars on the streets, and that means either the people who travelled in have gone home, or people have gone back to their homes and do not want to spend this evening going out or spending any more time together in public. However, here in the Mall, here at Buckingham Palace, and as Jeff was saying at Westminster Abbey, there are still a number of people who've made long journeys to come here, and that they want to stay a little longer, perhaps with their thoughts, perhaps reading some of the many floral tributes that we've talked about all week, and just spend a little more time before finally putting the lid on it, perhaps, because the funeral is always the end of everything in our culture, and of course Monday will be the beginning of a new future without the Princess of Wales. But with me tonight is Andrew Neil, Editor-in-Chief of the European and the Scotsman, and Christopher Wilson, the Royal Biographer. First of all, Andrew, if I can just comment on this idea that London is empty, but there are still some people here. Why are they still staying, do you think?
Because I think they want to linger. They still got a lot of thoughts. The event was a very cathartic event, and I think they don't want it to end abruptly. I think it built up slowly, and it came to a peak this afternoon. I think they then want to be let down gently, because it's been a very emotional time, particularly for the people who were here. They're drained. They're in no mood to party. Nobody's going right now to have a drink and saying here's to the future of the monarchy or here's to Diana. They just want to be, I think, quietly alone with their own thoughts.
Christopher, you experienced this funeral today. The silence, the sound of the horses' hooves and the gun carriage, clearly audible. Everyone completely involved in the funeral.
And it's carrying on even now. I just walked down Bond Street to come here, and there are people wandering around as if in a daze. They're not talking, or if they're talking silently, very quietly, and there's a fantastically somber mood, and it is, as you say, a ghost town.
Now, we've all remarked over the week how the group of mourners here at St James's Palace especially have been as one person, or as one family perhaps, going through shock and then grief and loss and anger, confusion, recriminations, all those things. Do you think that the funeral today had enough in there for everybody for them to somehow reconcile themselves to the mourning period?
I think it was a great success. I mean, almost a surprising success, because it's very different from the traditional kind of event that the British put on. I mean, we know we're the best in the world at state funerals or coronations or royal weddings, but we didn't know we could also do, and I think the people themselves have a lot to get a lot of the credit, because they nudged us in this direction, was that we were able to put on an event which touched every part of the nation, which was clearly British. It had some big traditional elements, but it was of 1997. Like the princess herself, who had elements of tradition in her, coming from a great aristocratic family, married into royalty, but she was above all a modern princess, and this was a modern funeral.
Christopher, have we set a precedent we can't go back from? There are other state funerals to come.
You've absolutely said it. I saw today, I think, the future for the royal family, and it was that the barrier between monarchy and the people came down. I think the moment which filled me with most poignancy was to see those hundreds of people walking behind the cortege, ordinary people who were in wheelchairs, being pushed by somebody else, who were on crutches, some people with sticks, they could barely walk.
That's right.
And they were part of a state funeral. Now, before, all we've ever seen is the military, the dignitaries, titles, medals, all that sort of thing. Suddenly, ordinary people were there. This is Diana's legacy. This is where the barrier has broken down. I think seeing a queen standing there with her family, displaying herself to the nation, was another indication.
Coming to the side door.
Yes.
Coming to the side door.
Yeah. I was going to say, the Queen mentioned there are lessons to be learned from this. Earl Spencer indicated there were lessons to be learned from this. Now, I'm sure both of you responded quite clearly to the politics of his statement. But at the same time, his speech, or his eulogy, if you like, was very moving and touched many people. He said so many things in there, talking about Diana's complexity, the fact that she was flawed, and that's what made her lovable.
He even mentioned her bulimia as well,
which
is
something
human thing you didn't think he would touch. And I think, again, it was a sign that we're moving to a more open monarchy, open in the proper way, not open as a soap opera, but open in its emotions too, as not trying to hide behind the traditionality of monarchy. And I think his remarks, cutting as they were in some areas, nevertheless began a new honesty between the monarchy and the people.
Christopher, you know more than most the brutal protocol that lies behind something like an English monarchy. Was Earl Spencer barging in, or was he setting some sort of agenda?
Yes, he was barging in. But Tony Blair has barged in this week. I think a great deal of what has happened this week can be put down to him. Now, tomorrow he is going to have lunch with the Queen. I think they are going to sit there and review what has happened here today. And I really, really hope, because I believe in the royal family, but I don't believe in the royal family as it exists at the moment. I want to see it change. I want to see it modernised. I don't want it to be living on protocols which were established 90 years ago. What I want to do is I want Tony Blair to sit down and tell the Queen
what she needs to hear, because her private secretary, her advisors, her courtiers cannot say it.
No, they give her the wrong advice too often. You know, the traditions of the monarchy right now was set down over 100 years ago by another prime minister in a monarch. It was Disraeli, the old famous Tory prime minister who brought Queen Victoria back out of Purdah after the death of Albert and made her an empress and the queen for an empire. Well, that was 100 years ago and more. Maybe Tony Blair is going to be the Disraeli of the 1990s and advise the Queen, because he talked about being a young country. That was what he talked about in the election campaign. Maybe he's going to make this a young monarchy again.
Is there the foundations of a caring family within Balmoral?
Well, of course, that was the point that Charles Althorp was making in his address. One of the things...
He raised a finger to the royal family.
He did,
he
didn't
said,
he?
I am watching you, the Spencer family. Don't forget that these boys, William and Harry, are half Spencer. They may be half Windsor, but they are half Spencer, and the Spencer family, on behalf of the nation, is watching their upbringing.
Because we don't want them to be brought up the way you brought up Charles and Anne and Andrew and so on.
We're running out of time. That interesting point there, because I read a floral tribute yesterday from an old lady who wrote a note on the flowers saying, Prince William, I know you'll make a good king because you've got Diana's blood in your veins. Now, you know, can they be reared? Can the baseball caps stay on?
The problem is that he hasn't got Diana as mother anymore, and he's only 15. He's gone through a terrible event. He probably blames the press for his mother's death. He is now, whatever Charles Spencer says, Charles lives in South Africa. He is back to some extent in the embrace of the House of Windsor, and that puts a slight shiver down my spine.
Do you feel that way?
When I saw the Queen standing there today, I hope she learned, as we learned, that the time has come for a change. I believe that she must have taken that in. Let's just hope with her meeting with the Prime Minister tomorrow, she can accept that and they can move forward.
Charles and Andrew, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Will you leave us here at Buckingham Palace? Much to think about for the future, but indeed much to think about that's just happened over the last few days. What is sure, I think, is that in the final words that came out of Westminster Abbey tonight, we do have to say goodbye to the past and look ahead for what's to come, however interesting or daunting it might be. Steffi.
Princess Diana was finally laid to rest in the most private of family services at her ancestral home of Althorp. Spokesman Brill Spencer said the family did not intend to release details of the burial, which was always intended to be held away from the public gaze.
A day of powerful emotions in the county Diana called home. Althorp Hall this morning besieged by flowers, a final chance for quiet contemplation and to pay final tributes.
If someone dies who you love, you want to be with them when they're in their final resting place, don't you? So that is why we're all here for Diana.
And so they came in their tens of thousands, lining the route of Diana's last journey, along roads she would have known as a teenager growing up here. And again, her cortege deluged with bouquets.
We thank you for the way that Diana became a beacon of hope.
Here they'd followed the funeral service on the radio, and nowhere was the minute's silence more deeply felt. Many moved close to tears.
Very sad. I just feel an emptiness almost, but it was good.
Words can't describe it. I think, like I say, everybody was just so touched by it.
They'd waited for hours to welcome her home, but now the long vigil was almost over. Some perhaps too young to fully comprehend what they were seeing. But as
I'm very pleased she has come home. Very pleased indeed. And I think it's a right fitful place for her to be. She's an Northampton girl. And now she's home.
Very sad, yeah, she's gone home now. And God bless her. But I think we did her proud. It was a lovely day, lovely funeral.
John Ray, Sky News, Northamptonshire.
In Paris, where Diana died almost a week ago, people stood in silence to remember her. On the French Riviera, yachts sounded their sirens at noon London time, and flags were lowered to half-mast. This report from Sky's Europe correspondent, Arnoud van Linden.
The sirens of the yachts in the south of France trumpet their grief. A few short weeks ago, the princess had still been on holiday here. Now, in every harbour along the Riviera, there was the same piercing declaration of mourning at the precise moment the princess's coffin was carried into Westminster Abbey. In the French capital, the opposite occurs. The lights at Marks and Spencer are dimmed, and at this most British of stores, French staff and French customers ponder the moment in total silence. Only the British stores in Paris made such gestures, some with a minute's silence, others by not opening their doors till after the funeral service was over. At the site of the accident, the French appeared to be outnumbered by tourists, drawn at the moment of the funeral to the place where Diana died a week before. They read the tributes left behind over the last 7 days, some short, some long. They stared at the flowers, some fresh, some fading, and individually they mourned. One family from Cheshire choosing not to go home, but to be at this place, at this moment, to pay their respects.
If I'm not in London, I'm glad I'm here. Because it's terrible.
Only at one spot did the French authorities mark the day, a single policeman bringing the traffic to a halt from the Faubourg Saint-Honoré outside the British Embassy, as inside they observed the end of a week of worldwide mourning and closed the book of condolence.
Mesdames, Messieurs, s'il vous plaît, une minute de silence à la mémoire de Diana, princesse du Gard.
Arnaud van Linden, Sky News, Paris.
The funeral was attended by many celebrities, all personal friends of the princess. After the service, 3 of them gave their reaction to the day's events to Simon McCoy.
Oh, I think so. I think it was a wonderful mixture. When Elton sang that song, I think it was dead right to include it in the service. And it didn't jar at all, not one iota. But I think the star of the show, if you'd like to call it that, was her brother. I mean, that was an amazing speech.
It was a very strong message about the paparazzi, and to hear clapping in Westminster Abbey on a day like this was quite something.
Incredible. Apparently it started outside and went right through the Abbey. But you know, she said to me 2 years ago, she said, thank you for remembering my birthday, which I always did anyway. But she said, you know, there is nothing I can do anymore that is not known. So, I mean, I can't even keep a secret anymore. She was really upset about it at the time.
Chris, the message from Earl Spencer today very much was, leave the 2 boys alone. Don't let them go through. I know I've spoken to you in the past about this. You knew Diana too. Someone's got to listen, haven't they?
I don't know. I suppose that over the years I've become cynical because one waits for the next big thing to happen. This is the way, for example, terrorists have always worked. They do an outrage and they just wait for that to calm down slightly and there'll be another one. But I think on this occasion, the love that this woman has generated on such a massive scale all over the world has also turned to a greater understanding. As Earl Spencer said, she was Diana the Huntress and also the most hunted woman on earth.
I thought perhaps the most moving occasion and moment in the entire service was that when Charles Spencer finished speaking, outside, the people listening and watching, applause started.
We were here. It was quite amazing.
Nobody applauded in the Abbey to start with. It was silent. And that applause, that public statement, that public determination that what she stood for, she not do, but moved into the Abbey, into the whole Abbey.
Awesome, wasn't it?
I've never heard anything in my life. Memorial service.
No, I mean, you're always told not to clap in a church, aren't you?
That was the answer. That was the people saying, you must listen.
And Charles Spencer, of course, said that. I mean, he said her blood relations will see that happen.
The concern, obviously, and firstly, for him, obviously, were William and Harry.
Yes.
What is the message to television executives, newspaper editors after today?
Give them their time. Give them their space.
I agree with you, Wayne. If you went to her home, as my colleagues have many times, I'm sure, you go into the main sitting room and there are pictures of all sorts of people around the place. 90% of the pictures are with William and Harry, or of William and Harry. And if she cared about anything above everything else, it was their future.
Yep.
And she was absolutely determined that this protocol and ring fencing of the royal family was something which she found unacceptable. And that if the royal family and our hierarchical establishment in this country was to continue, they had to be made aware of the cruelties of life. That's why she didn't just back the obvious charities. She backed AIDS, she backed leprosy, she backed homelessness, she backed drugs.
She backed victims of our society.
Absolutely. And those with no voice.
Yes.
Those who couldn't speak for themselves. Now, if she does that, and if that is continued to the understanding of Prince William and Prince Harry, then her life will not have been totally in vain.
The Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen Mother have arrived back at Balmoral. They were driven in through the gates a short time ago. Tony Blair and his wife Cherie will join the Queen at Balmoral tomorrow. The focus for many in Scotland today was in Edinburgh, where the funeral was watched at a special service.
In Scotland, the bleak weather reflected the mood of a country in mourning. In the shadow of Edinburgh Castle, silent crowds gathered to watch the Westminster service on giant screens. They didn't want to be alone, they said, as they remembered the Princess of Wales.
We were very shocked at the beginning of the week when we heard the news, and we just want to come and be part of it with other people.
I think everybody just feels absolutely heartbroken, and I didn't want to be alone. Somehow we needed to do something.
When this happened, it broke my heart. It's such a shame she died. She was a brilliant woman, and what she did in her life was absolutely marvellous. And I think that's what her sons have got to remember.
The minute's silence was broken by a piper's funeral lament. Silence too at Balmoral, the royal family's Scottish retreat. It was here that the news of Princess Diana's death was broken to her two young sons. At the palace of Holyrood House, the Queen's official residence in Scotland's capital, flowers were laid throughout the day. Local people and tourists united in their grief. Rona Dougal, Sky News, Edinburgh.
In Wales, as in so many places, the sense of loss was personal. 6 words attached to a bouquet of flowers captured in simple eloquence the sentiments of so many. Admired from afar, missed from within. At Cardiff's Llandaff Cathedral, a male voice choir began the national service of remembrance. Video screens relayed live the funeral from Westminster Abbey, the congregation here joining in with both prayer and song. For those unable to get into the cathedral, another screen outside transmitted events as they happened. The people here not just watching, but taking part.
For 1 minute, the whole nation keeps silent.
I think being with other people, not just sitting at home, but feeling a part of it as well, because I couldn't go to London.
So close you can get to herself, I suppose. I mean, I never met her, never seen her, close. So that's why I came here, for that reason.
The congregation was led by the Welsh secretary.
I think it was very important. I think that over the years people have understood that that Princess Diana did have a very clear part in Welsh life, and she was very well respected. I mean, when she came to Wales straight after the wedding with Prince Charles, there was immediately a spontaneous and very warm reception. And I think that the service which has been done here today in Llandaff is a great credit to the city of Cardiff and to the people of Wales.
On this saddest of days, this nation's capital has been all but deserted. Streets were near empty, shops closed as a mark of respect, doors to attractions and monuments firmly sealed. The people of Wales have said their goodbyes, both public and private. Disbelief at Diana's death has given way to this reality. Sadness, though, will only be dimmed by time.
Goodbye, Rose. May you well grow your heart. You are the great place to send. Well, was torn apart. You called out to our country, and you whispered to those in pain, now you belong to heaven, and the stars spell out your name.
Martin Lowe, Sky News, Cardiff.
The usually bustling heart of Belfast was empty, reflecting the void left by the death of the Princess of Hearts. For the people of Northern Ireland, there was no focal point, no place they could go to publicly express their grief. The Princess of Wales' life and tragic death touched so many people in a personal way. They paid their final tribute to her in the privacy of their own homes. Those who couldn't gathered around television screens wherever they were to watch the funeral. One of them was Northern Ireland's Olympic golden girl, Mary Peters, too upset to speak about the princess she met on several occasions. At Belfast City Hall, passers-by stopped to look at the floral tributes. Some with special memories, having spent time with Diana, Princess of Wales.
It was a great rapport between Prince William and herself, a young boy, but at the same time she, just treated him as any mother would treat a son. The more remarkable state in my mind was, she said, I would like him to grow up to be my friend.
We were really amazed on Monday in Bernardo's because a number of our young people some of them we hadn't seen for several years, came back because they were so upset and they were in grief, and they brought back photographs of her visits, and they just wanted to sit around on Monday and talk and share the memories.
Life will return to normal now the funeral is over, but for many it will never be the same. Tom Coulter, Sky News, Belfast.
Very little Saturday traffic, very few day trips out. In the north, normal life was put on hold in towns and cities everywhere. In Manchester, the call for a moment's silence came from the town hall and was difficult to ignore. At Manchester Airport, there was no such obvious call for silence, but at 11 o'clock, most people stood in tribute anyway. Hard to believe, but this is Blackpool on a Saturday in September. The holidays aren't yet over and the Golden Mile would normally be packed. But on this Saturday in September, at least until 2 p.m, the deck chairs stayed covered, the arcades stayed closed, and the fair rides stayed motionless. In Liverpool, the two Mersey tunnels were closed for a time, while these children of Toxteth showed their appreciation of a princess they once met. Two years ago, Princess Diana opened this community housing project. She met all these children. For some, plans made before last weekend's dreadful events had to be proceeded with. Sharon and David thought long and hard before going ahead with their wedding, then decided quite rightly it's what Diana would have wanted. Gary Cottrell, Sky News in Manchester.
In the United States, President Clinton mourned the deaths of both Diana and Mother Teresa. He described them as two women of vastly different backgrounds and worlds who showed how to live a life of meaning through concern for others.
A pilot in the skies over California shows how Diana was the Queen of Hearts to the people of the United States. This morning's poignant funeral ceremony was broadcast live to 2.5 billion people around the world. Radio reports were translated into 144 languages. Hong Kong's shopping area came to a standstill as crowds gathered to watch the live broadcast. Sadness and loss etched on their faces, these people mourned the princess thousands of miles from where her funeral was taking place. In Australia, the crowds at this soccer stadium in Adelaide came to a standstill for 1 minute to remember Diana. A sad lament from a lone piper, the only sound filling the air. The flag was lowered to half-mast outside the British Embassy in Tokyo. People came from early morning to say their own farewells. A mother and daughter pray for Diana among the photographs and flowers laid in memory of the princess. In the Irish Republic, the tricolour, so often a symbol of anti-British feeling, became instead a symbol of mourning for the Princess of Wales. And these people flying out of Britain today stood in silence at Heathrow Airport, united in their grief. Like so many others all over the world, they had probably never met Diana, but she touched their lives in a unique way. Eileen Whelan, Sky News.
Many of the thousands of people who Diana helped, often without publicity, joined the huge crowds today to pay their respects. Among them is Emma May, a teenager who struck up a real friendship with Diana after the princess helped to fund her treatment. Emma has Turner's syndrome, a condition which only affects women and causes a variety of serious illnesses. Emma has produced her own video diary of today's events.
My name's Emma May, I'm 16 years old, and I've come to London today to pay my last respects to Princess Diana. I met Princess Diana in 1991 when she presented me with the Champion Children of the Year award for triumph over adversity. For the years after that, we kept in touch by letter. She was always interested in how everything was and kept telling me to stay strong and keep up my courage. And she was just a friend in every sense of the word. I've come up to London today with my mum, Carol, and she was as equally devastated as me on Sunday when we heard the news and wanted to come up with me to pay her respects to Diana.
Just sort of very sad for the way that, that she was treated, really, and, bearing in mind that she's the mother of our future king, really, and...
Very sad. I feel like I'm saying goodbye to a friend, really. His funeral, the procession is just about to come past. Devastating. The cortege was very grand and everyone very silent, and it was just a very sad, solemn moment. It brought home everything that had happened over the past few days. It just didn't seem real still that it was her lying there in that coffin. It just felt that it was totally unfair. It was an absolutely beautiful service in every way, and people crying, and it's just been very moving morning. I think Princess Diana would have been proud. She deserved every bit of it.
Time to look at sport. Phil Martin joins us.
Thanks very much. Well, sport across Britain today was called off as a mark of respect to Diana, Princess of Wales. Overseas British sportsmen and women have paid their own tributes. Tennis number one Greg Rusedski is wearing a black ribbon during his US Open semi-final against Jonas Björkman at Flushing Meadow. Rusedski watched the funeral service on television in New York this morning. He won the first set 6-1, but lost the next two, 6-3, 6-3. At the moment in the fourth set, it's currently 2 games all. Formula One world champion Damon Hill led a minute's silence at the Monza circuit in Italy. The teams along the pit lane, many wearing black armbands or ribbons, emerged from their garages at 12 noon local time to pay their respects while the funeral was underway in London. The 50,000 strong crowd also fell quiet. It's the first time Formula One had observed a minute's silence since the death of Ayrton Senna. Qualifying for tomorrow's race eventually got underway. Benetton's Jean Alesi took pole position with Hill in 14th place. The Olympic gold medalists Stephen Redgrave and Matthew Pinsent won gold as part of the men's coxless fours at the World Rowing Championships in France. The British women's coxless four also won gold, and there were silver medals in the women's double sculls and the men's lightweight eights, with a bronze for Greg Searle in the men's single sculls. At the medal ceremony, the Union flag was raised to half-mast during the national anthem. The golfers competing in the European Masters at Crans-sur-Sierre in Switzerland also observed a minute's silence before the third round commenced. Many of the players also wore black ribbons or armbands. The leader going into tomorrow's final round is the three-time Open and US Masters winner Nick Faldo. He finished on 14 under par, 1 stroke clear of the field. That's the sport now. Here's Michael.
Phil, thanks so much. It was Diana's work with charity that won the respect of so many people. She helped organisations like the Red Cross, the Leprosy Mission and AIDS charities. Millions of people worldwide whom she'd never met benefited from her efforts. Here are some images of Diana, the carer.
Well, Diana, the Princess of Wales, made her final journey today. Her memory will be shared not just by the family and their British nation, but millions of people around the world. Let's look at some moments from her life.
But I always care, and I miss the love we shared.
I think the British people need someone in public life to give affection, to make them feel important, to support them, to give them light in their dark tunnels. I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts. Someone's got to go out there and love people and show it.
Diana's body is finally at rest tonight in the grounds of the Spencer family home, Althorp. Private family service followed a day in which the world mourned the death of the people's princess. This evening, Diana's sons are understood to be with their father at Highgrove.
The day began when Diana's coffin left her London home, Kensington Palace, to begin the 2-mile journey to Westminster Abbey. Princes William and Harry joined the cortege for the second half of the procession. They were flanked by their father, Prince Charles, the Duke of Edinburgh, and Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. The strain of the day only showed itself as Prince William kept his head bowed for most of the walk.
The coffin, flanked by 12 Welsh guardsmen, was carried into Westminster Abbey for the funeral service, draped in the royal standard. Inside, the royal family mingled with celebrities, actors and fashion designers who had been invited to pay their respects to Diana.
For Elton John, the service was the stage for his most harrowing appearance. Despite his obvious emotion, Diana's friend gave the performance of a lifetime.
And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the stars set when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.